Hello, everyone. Welcome to BrickSide Chat, where we take your questions and turn them into conversations. My name is Evan.
And I'm Paul.
And today we're going to talk about... There's this fly. Okay, we're going to talk about business partnerships. But before we get into that, Paul, is there any news or anything?
Yes. Most important news, there's an extremely annoying fly here in the studio.
There is a fly flying around. If we need to, I apologize if you have to see this, but we're ready with the fly swatter. Sponsored by Barbara
I'm not going to try pronouncing
Barbara. Sponsored by Barbara. What's going on in the Lego news world?
All right. Lego recently released their first half of 2022 financial report, which is definitely worth the read, but I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I'm just going to break it down into a couple little bullet points because otherwise we'd be here for, a very, very long time. So Lego revenue grew 17%, with the final total revenue being $3.5 billion US approximately. I converted it from DKK. I don't remember what the original was. So, Lego also said that they are looking to grow their connection with Epic Games, looking to develop some kind of metaverse. We'll see. We know that that's a little bit of a hot topic right now. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't seem to be having too great of a time with it, since Facebook employees don't seem to like it. But that's not what this podcast is about. Lego also said that they're going to be starting to issue paper bags instead of their plastic bags. They started in the first half of 2022, but they're really going to be looking to ramp it up here in the second half. And they were a little vague about when their exact target is to have everything replaced. So we'll have to see whether they actually manage to replace it all by the end of 2022. But that seems to be their plan.
I'm curious to see how that goes, because I would like, we've had discussions on this, and maybe this is a transition into kind of the topic of maybe not agreeing with a potential business partner, but we've had discussions on, moving towards an eco-friendly thing, and we recently just stopped using tape, plastic tape, and we use paper tape now.
We now sew all of our packages by hand.
Because I like moving towards that more sustainable, eco-friendly thing, and I've been talking at least with you about paper bags of some sort. Obviously, we've never found anything, so I'm curious to see, maybe even get a set with paper and see how that works, and see if there's a financially responsible way that we could move in that direction as well. Because we use hundreds of bags a week, so I don't know.
Yeah,
I think that'd be cool.
I think definitely the biggest issue with that is Lego can obviously mass produce them in extremely high quantity. And they also, have presumably done a lot of R&D, so it could be some kind of proprietary blend of, plant stuff.
That's true.
So we might not be able to get up to the scale that is required to make it affordable for us. But we'll have to do some more research.
Uline will have something
eventually.
I hope.
I still want to get a park
Uline.
bench from Uline. That's the product that I wanna get. But Evan says that park benches are not an acceptable use of business funds.
I do all the ordering, so
yeah. Shipping department addressed to shipping department.
Shipping manager Evan, which is technically true, actually. Like to an extent.
Yeah. Speaking of who does what, this is going to be a pretty good segue into business partners, although I think part of the point of a good segue is you don't say it's a segue, but we are now segueing to our main topic, business partnerships. Do you want to kind of explain why we picked this topic for this one?
Yeah. So when we were streaming last weekend, I don't remember who was watching and who said it, and I don't know if you're here right now or we're not really watching the chat, but there, someone asked, what happened to Kyle, essentially, because if you don't know and you're listening or watching this right now, there were three of us at the very beginning. Kyle is still here; he's not gone, but he is no longer an owner of the business. So we got a question on that, and then that I think maybe we talked about it a little bit before, but we also kind of in that moment I think clarified and said, that's what our next BrickSide Chat episode will be on, and it was the business partnership thing. So whoever said that last time essentially pushed us in this direction. It was already on our list of things. We have 4 or 5 topics that we'll continue moving on in the future with episodes on. But I think there's a lot in terms of the history of, how, we've known each other for 20 years now.
Yeah.
Like, we've known each other for so long. So it's like, and we'll try to answer and maybe, people who are wondering how to choose a business partner.
Yeah.
I don't know that we can give a guideline of like what's maybe bad and what's maybe good, but we just have such a history.
Yeah.
And also like this, such a history of, I don't know if I'd really call it like true
entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, but a mindset of like wanting to do something. I think most people want to do something, but
it's always been about the project.
Yeah, it was never about like.
You were about to say never about making money, but that's not true.
No, yeah, I was gonna say it's never about making money. I think initially it wasn't.
Very back
initially when we were in
children.
elementary, maybe middle school is probably where the money talk started to come into it.
Yeah.
And then from there it just kind of grew. But initially, I'd say like there was no money. This fly. We've been trying to catch this fly for probably like 20 minutes now before we start. It's terrible.
Maybe we should turn on. We have a you can't really see it, but it's like an electric fly shocker thing, and we should just start waving that around in the air.
I don't remember where I was. This fly is killing me.
Yeah, the story, I guess, is for those of you who don't know, we have known each other for 20 years. We've told the story of how we met on After Hours, and I don't think I need to repeat it here, but we've always had an interest in putting on a show, I guess would honestly be the best way to put it.
That's a very accurate way, yeah.
Both in terms of how we run our business now and way back then when running a show was quite literal. The first things that we ever tried to do, I think, were basically plays in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
We would watch some TV show or whatever, and then we would go out and reenact it. And I feel like that's not unusual for a lot of kids who do imaginary play or whatever, but for us it was always about imagining an audience, right? And
right, when it was
putting
usually
on something.
Just my little sister.
The unwilling,
because you didn't have any
Yes.
you didn't have any siblings, so the show was
you were
always
about to say you didn't have any friends.
No, it was for one. It was the show for one.
Yeah.
And yeah, the unwilling. I don't know if I'm sure Jenna was entertained sometimes.
Sometimes.
I'm not sure. But we always
We'll have to
imagined
ask
there was
sometime.
we can ask her. We always imagined there, the concept of more.
Yeah.
Of being bigger than it was.
And that kind of eventually evolved, but it was really always this idea of showmanship. And we were never content with just the project that we had in front of us. And I think that is really what is meant by entrepreneurial mindset. Is it was always about going bigger, going better, and really just pushing the limits of what we could accomplish with what we had available. And we didn't really have a good understanding of what we had available.
Right.
Because money was not something that we understood. We, at one point, wanted to build. We were always really into Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
That is always a fascination that both of us have had, not really with seeing the characters or whatever, but with the mechanics, the engineering involved, all the behind the scenes stuff. The Imagineering, sorry, copyright, trademark, Disney, not us. All of the Imagineering and just all the behind the scenes stuff. We even tried to actually build Disneyland in Minecraft one time, which is a story we'll probably get into later. But something that we did really want to build was basically Star Tours. We wanted to build a simulator, and we thought that like $1,000 was enough to build a hydraulically powered simulator with screens and that could support.
Well, because you already had the projector. That was the most expensive thing in our mind.
True. That could like fit a whole group of people and everything. Yeah, we just had no concept. And it definitely took a while for the understanding of keeping it realistic. And that's definitely still something that maybe we struggle with a bit now is, the realistic dream.
Yeah, but I think half the fun is that dream of what something could be.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Like that's, I'll come home from something or whatever. Paul's working in the house and I was working and I'm driving home. I drive a lot. And so when I'm driving, I'm just thinking of things. And like, I always have like 40,000 ideas bouncing around in my head. Most of them never come out and told to anyone. But like, there's days where I'll come home and I'll be really excited about like something that maybe was dumb, bad idea. But like in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And I'm like pitching it to Paul and he's in the house and, he's standing there nodding and listening.
Yeah.
But I'm so fired up and excited about this. And like, so there's still a lot of that, like, I think then of the aspect of like something being much bigger than it actually is or than it realistically would be. But I think that's actually almost in a way the motivation for doing certain things.
Yeah. The fun of, for us, the fun of business, or I guess I'll continue using the term, the fun of projects, because Just a Brick in the Bucket is clearly a business, but I think in our minds,
really,
it's still, we really do think of it like a project.
It's
just a project that keeps growing and, makes money.
Sure. Yeah.
But for us,
I think within Just a Brick in the Bucket, there are other projects.
Agreed.
There's obviously the store, which is the main moneymaker and everything, and that's where the majority of the time goes because that's what needs to function. But in my opinion, like the media of it is another project that's like, to me, really exciting. And like After Hours was something that we actually shot back in like June. After Hours also comes out tomorrow. The second episode tomorrow, Saturday. Tune in to it.
Yes.
Anyway, there's like, so, where was I going with this?
We were talking about projects within projects.
Yeah. So I think Just a Brick in the Bucket as a company is a project, and it's something we can find like things to be passionate about within. But within the company as a whole, there's also smaller other things that like we can be really excited about. And the podcast was something I've talked about forever now, like months and months and months. Not just this format of a podcast, or like not even the After Hours concept. I don't know where that came from actually.
The After Hours was just drinking and looking for an excuse to do wings, I think, and then it just kind of evolved into its whole own independent thing. At least that's how you pitched it to us. I don't know if that was just a way of you saying it to get us to accept it or not, but
I don't think it was my idea. I think when we were like Kyle, Blake, you and I were just hanging out one night, and we had that thought of like we should do a podcast, and then it was like more of like, okay, we need to talk. It was always on a night where everyone was over and we're trying to figure out what is this podcast, and there were too many ideas in the room or just no ideas, and so like it ended up when it came down to like graphics and everything kind of being me just having to figure it all out, which I feel is normal. But it was a project that like gave us an excuse to just do something fun.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, I think, is a little more narrowed down and focused on a topic.
But it's still very much... I mean, we could have just done white table, no tablecloth, in front of the bins. And...
This or
yeah,
After Hours?
This. We could have done that, but we chose not to. And it probably would have... Most people who are watching these early episodes from our normal subscriber base probably wouldn't have thought too much about it. But for us, the project has always been about pushing it to the next level of, how can we make it more ambitious? How can we, I don't want to say that we think, how can we add challenge, because that's not what it is, but there's definitely subconsciously some kind of a level.
And that's a side effect, I think, is a natural challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really where I think the business partnership thing comes in, is we really bounce idea. It's the business partnership is really about trying to figure out a way to get to the next project, because for us we're never content with what is in front of us and what we have. Like, if, let's just say, this will never happen, but Just a Brick in the Bucket becomes $1 billion company. Never ever happen. Let's just say tomorrow, for some reason, Just a Brick in the Bucket is $1 billion company. I don't think that either of us would say, oh, done now, Just a Brick in the Bucket is good, and then just not do anything with that. I think we would open up a completely unrelated business, or, do some other kind of project. And that push to always do something new, I think, is what inevitably led us to form some kind of business partnership rather than just, keep acting out in the backyard. Was, when you have explored all of the imagination play and stuff, then the next step of making the project more grand is to actually go out and do it. And I think although Just a Brick in the Bucket wasn't planned, it kind of just happened. It was very much of here's something that's almost not real. How can we go ahead and bring it down into reality? I don't know if that makes any sense, but
if it doesn't make sense to me, I'm not thinking it's making sense to the people who are watching right now.
I guess.
But I guess if you're saying Just a Brick in the Bucket was something that was this concept of a dream to sell Lego and make money off that as a project, then maybe if that's what you're trying to get at.
I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that we didn't sit down one day and be like, okay, starting tomorrow, we're going to start selling Lego. It was that we saw something that was kind of, you running it in your, closet or whatever, and it was very, very loosey-goosey, I guess. It wasn't super formulated, and it wasn't, a business. And then it's about how can we take this little seed of a thing and turn it into, this grand thing. Because in your mind, you might be imagining, oh, I want to make money off of this. But then it's about how can we take that dream and crystallize it into reality. And that's where the fun, at least for me in terms of building a business, is how can we take this abstract idea of whether it's the show. When we were little, we wanted to do we wanted to put Phantasmic on it. So we actually, got neighborhood kids to come in and be actors, and we really tried to make it reality. And I think that same drive is what now is kind of the cornerstone of our business partnership, if that makes any sense, is being united around wanting to get enough money to get to the next project. If that makes any sense.
That makes, yeah. And I think, maybe even transitioning into maybe what is the next topic on here, which not that we have topics in order or anything, but
say as we scroll down our notes.
I don't think we have an order here.
No, it's not really an order. It's just a list of.
And here, if you want me to tell you where we're going to the bottom where it says business partner dynamics. That's the direction I was headed. I think in terms of always having this vision of wanting to go bigger and wanting to do something more. You and I have different visions for things. A lot of the time, whether it's whatever it is, there's always there's a concept usually in both of our heads of what it might look like. But for the most part, a project is yours or mine. You more or less, one of us leans more heavily towards it, or where the project leans more heavily towards one of us, and then that's the person who ends up coming up with the actual overall thing. And in terms of the two of us running things together, if we just talk about daily operations of the store as the main component of the business, because that's really what it is. I do kind of the fulfillment of it. I manage the people who are picking. I pick orders. I verify orders. I pack orders. I respond to customer emails. I ship out replacement parts, issue refunds, all that kind of stuff. Whereas you are on the side of, we'll call it the, what do you want to call it? The manufacturing-esque side of it, where you're processing. That's the side of it. Processing pieces into the store and actually adding those parts. You put them in and I take them out, essentially.
Yeah.
And we've kind of, not that it's a solid line in between. Paul never comes and picks orders, and not I never add a piece. But there's a line there that we can kind of respect each other's side to an extent of whatever process you have. If it works for you, that's great. Maybe I'll come in and tell you how I feel about it. Actually, I'll definitely come in and tell you how I feel about it.
And vice versa.
Exactly.
But there's an understanding that if I put my foot down and said, no, I want to catalog this way, 99% of the time, Evan is going to respect that. And if he said, I want to pack this way, even though I might really believe that it's inefficient, I'm going to respect his domain. And I guess in terms of dynamics, that is a really important feature to have in any kind of partnership, because the truth is you won't. This is gonna sound very oxymoronic, but you won't ever agree on anything, no matter how similar the opinion is, because there's always going to be some.
I don't know if I'd say that.
If you drill down far enough, eventually you're going to find something that you disagree about, right?
And we drill down far enough on everything.
Exactly. And so one of the downsides to being in a partnership is the amount of time that you spend talking and debating ideas. That might also be a positive because they get thought out. But there comes a point where you have these things compartmentalized into domains, so that Evan can kind of authoritatively say, we've debated this topic about shipping enough. It's kind of moot now, right? And vice versa, in terms of cataloging. And having that respect and the ability to just say, okay, I accept that this is a mutual endeavor. Because a compromise, when you're dealing with something that is not, that actually has impact on the real world, a 50-50 compromise is not always actually possible, because you can't have 50% of, the minifig parts go in the minifig part container and 50% go in the large slope container.
Right. Usually I think in business, a compromise is a difficult thing to come to as a conclusion for something. And
so you really have to have enough respect for the other person to accept that I don't understand why you're right, but you clearly believe enough that you're right, and I respect your opinion enough that I'm going to assume I'm just going to let it go, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean admitting defeat, because that is a compromise. It's about compromising on things over time, rather than coming to 50-50 on every issue. And I think that is something that a lot of people maybe misunderstand about a business partnership is, you can't agree 50-50 on every issue, but, maybe you can come close to 50-50 on different issues.
Yeah. That compromise is a difficult thing to achieve. I do think there's things we probably have gotten where it's like
instantly agree.
Oh, totally. But I mean, in terms of coming up with some sort of a compromise, but it's usually a difficult thing where there just isn't room to bring these two ideas together and somehow mesh them. It's usually, this just makes more sense because it's faster. And even if I don't like it because it's more unorganized, if it's faster,
I know exactly what you're thinking.
Or whatever,
about. Yeah.
it's a thing that we'll do sometimes, or whatever it might be. It's hard to have that compromise. But I think with a lot of the media, because we've kind of, I don't want to say separated the company in two sides, because we obviously have not whatsoever, but the media for the most part is something that I've kind of taken over and try to manage
mm-hmm.
in terms of building out a little bit of a schedule ahead of time as to what videos are coming out, trying to make sure that we have, not that I didn't build out the list for this, but making sure we had a list at least ahead of time, and so we don't just start streaming and don't know what we're doing. Mm-hmm. I've kind of taken on that responsibility for the media, and it's not like, I guess with the media, what I'm trying to say is it's not like that is as hard of you have to do it this way or you have to do it this way.
Yeah.
That's where there's a lot more, if we want to call it creativity, where those two ideas can blend together. It works a lot better than in the store side, where it is mathematically
mm-hmm.
quicker to pick a piece this way than it is to do it this way.
I guess it's a lot more acceptable to make an emotional argument over something that's a creative thing than something that's a mathematical thing, because saying I just like it this way isn't really valid when you're talking about the speed of picking, right? But choosing red over, well, actually color theory is very mathematical, but just in terms of I want to make a video about this topic
mm-hmm.
versus this other topic, there might be a slight statistical difference in views, but a lot of the time it doesn't really make a difference. And so you can come to a lot more of a kind of mutual agreement there on that.
Right. Something else with, and this was probably close to a month ago. But in terms of the dynamics of having a business partner, and I'd say especially, and I think later on we're going to try to get into a little bit how maybe choosing a business, or what makes a better business partner versus not and stuff. You and I argue a tremendous amount. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the fact that we've quite literally known each other since we remember.
Yeah.
So there's that, of course, where it's like...
Sorry, there is something tangled around my seat.
Settling arguments for sure is a challenge for us. And the other night, or probably 3 or 4 weeks ago now, we got into a fairly decent, severely decent argument.
I don't get mad on the outside.
Paul does not show frustration or verbally show frustration very often in terms of like yelling. I do, on the other hand.
And that was kind of what the discussion was about.
That's what it started with, yeah.
But I'm sure we'll go into the whole kind of story in just a minute. But just before we do that, I want to kind of draw the difference between an argument and a debate, which we're not going to be able to use those terms in their correct thing. But I just do want to bring this up, that an argument or a debate, there we go, I just did it wrong again, is not bad. That's the only way that you can arrive at a conclusion. But knowing when a debate becomes just an argument, where it's just fighting just to fight, is really one of the biggest struggles that I definitely have, and I think you might, have had as well in the business, is knowing when to just
drop it.
And that is probably, if I just had to drill down to us like a single piece of advice, in terms of business partners, is you've got to learn how to know when to just drop it, because the chance is it probably doesn't really matter that much, what it is, But anyway, continuing with the story here. Sorry.
Yeah, so I was sick. Yeah, this was about a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right before this? No, right after this. It must have been...
It
must have been the day before this, because we didn't talk about it before we did this last month. We didn't talk about it in the live stream. So it happened like the day before. Yes, for sure. I remember this now.
But it started with...
Well, let me explain the week. So there's more to this. So I got COVID in late August, early September. And so I was out of the store, obviously, I think I was only actually out for like 5 days, but I was out, and essentially Monday was a holiday or something where something where orders couldn't go out on Monday. I want to say because the post office was closed. And then a few orders went out on Tuesday, and then no orders went out on Wednesday. No orders went out on Thursday. And then this is where my anger stemmed from, because on Friday... Nope, that's not right either. This was the week after. Let me start this over. This is the week after I had COVID. Stuff didn't go out most of that week, which was fine because that was expected. But then orders didn't go out Thursday and didn't go out Friday. Maybe they just didn't go out Friday or Saturday, and then they didn't go out Monday because there was a holiday or something on Monday. And then that Tuesday is the day I came back, and I was in the store. I tested negative that morning, but I had to go straight back to work and stuff, so somewhere around there. I don't remember exactly time frame, but essentially I had to go back to work, so I wasn't able to be in the store that day, and orders hadn't gone out for days. And so when I came home that day, the garage was open or something, and I pulled into the driveway, and I went into the garage with the intention of closing it up, because we usually leave the garage door cracked because it's too hot in there so the air can flow through. So I went in the garage and started to close it up, and then I realized there were still a lot of packages. And so, in my mind, because that morning, I'm just telling you my side, I'm not...
Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, me too. In my mind, because that morning I had told Paul, we got to make sure that's priority number one for the day. packages have to go out today because they've been here for like 4 or 5 days. People don't have their packages. If it's a week before they even get a shipping notification. In my opinion, that is totally absurd. Obviously, with other store, you can do however you want. But in my opinion, for our store, as much as possible, I try to get that package out within 24 hours. So obviously I was out and stuff, but being that we had a conversation that morning about making sure packages go out, and having come in the garage, probably from a long day of work, I was still sick. I was not great. I go in the garage and I see packages there. I'm just angry. So I turn off the lights and I close up the garage, and then I come in and I walk into the house and I see you sitting on the floor. I think you were doing something. I
was working with computers.
Yeah, you were doing something, and I came in and I'm like, why did no orders get shipped? I was angry, very vocally, verbally, visually angry. And you snapped, which you never do. Like you did once in May before our trip.
Yes.
I remember that too. But it doesn't happen often. That's what I'm saying. Like maybe 3 times a year.
Yes, and time,
I remember them.
That time actually I think was because I sometimes get insomnia. So for like 2 or 3 days I'd barely slept, and then also we were leaving on this trip and there was just a ton to do. So I would say that was more of a stress related snap than actually being angry, like at Evan specifically. But this time I definitely was angry. And I'd like to add on to your story a little bit here.
Sure, of course.
Because the reason why I snapped had less to do with him saying something that specific time and more with the fact that in my mind, we just, much like he was angry because we just had a conversation. When Evan first got out of quarantine after COVID, I had said something that I probably shouldn't have said.
In front of an employee. What I told him was, I think I said, it's fine, calm down. Because I don't remember what it was I said in response to. That's not what you said. I'm not going to say what you said.
Okay. That is what I remember saying. But I think it was something along the lines of calm down.
It was.
And I realized the second it came out of my mouth what was about to happen. But at that point, I'd already said it, right? And Evan, in my mind, I was trying to de-stress the situation. Obviously, that was not what happened, and I will take responsibility for instigating this. But Evan then, in my mind, escalated it a little bit.
I replied.
He replied professionally, if we were in a different profession, WWE style. And meanwhile, there was an employee in between us, basically, who overheard everything. And I left and thought about what had just happened because I don't like to lose my temper, right? So I try to think before I reply, right? And I was leveraging in my head, like, he was probably, I said what I said because I figured that you were still kind of sick and stressed. And so I was trying to basically tell you to just chill out for the day. I think chill out was actually what I said.
Yes.
As part of what I said.
That's part of what you said.
And so I step outside and I think about, what just happened. And I'm like, I should just let this go. But I am going to go ahead and talk to Evan because in my mind, what was said should not have been said in front of an employee. I don't think, it's not great to talk to people at all this way, but especially in front of an employee. So I kind of pull him aside later and we go into his office and we talk. And basically I tell him, please don't be accusative in the way that, you start a conversation. Instead of assuming that I have ill intent, or at least it comes across to me as the way that you say things is that it seems like it has ill intent. And I said, could you please in the future work on trying to, lead with a question or not assume that I intentionally was trying to, do something. And then Evan also said, it's very important that I not make assumptions about his emotional state without asking first, because something that I do a lot is I will tell people that they're angry, or I will tell people,
and that could not make me more angry.
And what I really mean to say is something along the lines of, you look frustrated, and it comes out as you are frustrated, or you're being angry, or worst, which I try not to say at all, but you're being irrational or something like that, right? And I totally understand how that's a very awful thing to hear, right? And that was kind of in my mind the conclusion of the discussion was, him saying I'll work on improving being accusative, and me saying I'll work on trying not to make statements about your emotional state. And then we went off and did our own thing, right? And so from my perspective, having just come out of that discussion, when he comes home,
I was very accusatory.
Totally. And it gets in my face, right? That is what kind of caused me to snap. If you want to continue the story now, I had my little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the majority of the story until we, once I came in and pretty much scolded you for not shipping that day, when that morning we had a discussion that packages had to go out because customers needed their stuff. It had already been 5 days. I was really, really mad. Then you stood up for yourself, which, again, rarely happens. Not that that's bad that you stood. That's great that you stood up for yourself. Like, it's just a good thing. But you stood up in more than just talking to me. It was more of like you were yelling at me just as, and we were standing in the kitchen now. And
I'm sure the neighbors had.
Oh, I'm sure some of the neighbors heard something. But then there was, of course, that moment of like, well, then this isn't going to work out. As in, like, why are we business partners? Like, all that, that always, not actually, rarely do we ever get to that point of like, why are we in this business together?
It's happened a couple times, and that's usually the moment where we're both kind of like, what are we talking about?
We need to take a second, step aside, and then come back together and then continue this discussion. And if we ever do that, it turns into a discussion. If we take a second, it's usually that we're in that moment and we're really yelling. But essentially, out of this conversation came like, I then understood Paul's perspective as to why the packages didn't go out.
I would like to say that I did try to get packages out. It was an absolute disaster. I made it to the post office. I got a bunch of packages returned to me because they were missing labels. I was very rushed and very stressed, and I thought I did a good job for what was there. But I also understand that it could have been avoided by me going in and starting packing way before when I did. And, at least that was kind of the output of the discussion.
Right.
Was thinking ahead and stuff. And, but from my perspective, I had made an effort, and my only real issue is the fact that in my mind, he had assumed that I had made no effort. And it kind of goes, a little bit both ways in that, because there's no way that he could have known that I made that effort. Right. So that was kind of what started the initial outburst. And then it turned into a kind of a broader discussion, once we kind of worked through that and, had the more emotional component.
Right.
Of the discussion.
Once you really explained what happened and that you did ship packages, they just couldn't all go out. At that point it was like, okay, well, what can we do? It's 8:00 at night. The post office is closed. The packages are packed and ready now. They're just not there. There's nothing I could do. So continuing to yell and just escalate the situation wasn't going to fix anything. The problem, or not the problem, but what came out of that discussion was also a lot more than just
about packages.
Because really then for the first time, I guess, since I've been, makes it sound bad, but since I've been pushed into the fulfillment side of things, not that I was forced that direction, I didn't want to go that way, but I've really started to have this, I really care and I'm really proud about how I pack packages. And I'm really happy when a customer emails us and I'm at the computer there and I see the little email and I get back to them within like 4 minutes and I fix their problem. They say, hey, I'm missing a piece. And I go pick that piece off the wall, put it in a package, and within 5 minutes they have a shipping label created and a tracking number, and it's going to be dropped off at the post office that day. Or an order comes in that afternoon at like 4:15 and it's only, 40 lots, 200 pieces. I can go pick this before I have to drop off at the post office before 5. In my mind as a customer on that side, that would be the most exciting thing when you place an order and you have that expectation of, okay, it'll probably ship hopefully tomorrow. You're hoping tomorrow, maybe the next day after tomorrow. And you get that notification, 20, 30 minutes later that your order shipped. So to me, I had that emotional investment in the customer and in the way packages are packed. And I really, this was the first time in that discussion that I think I got to get that across to Paul. Not that I've never been hiding that from you or anything, but I've never seen that your perspective, I just have a different passion for what the customer receives than you did in that specific situation. Not that you don't care about them.
I mean this in the most, I mean the word emotional here in a very positive way, but Evan's a very emotional or passionate, person about things, and I'm not in the same way, and that was kind of I guess really what the discussion was about is I believe that the term we used was like crisis mode, or basically Evan always wants to, or at least from my perspective, and you can obviously jump in here. You are all about the emotional drive of I got to get this thing done, the emotional drive of I got to make this look good, the emotional drive of really caring truly on a personal level about whatever it is that you're doing. And for me, it's more about I really struggle to cross that level of abstraction, because Evan is way more likely to get emotional about something, whereas, just in terms of blowing up, right? I very rarely get to that emotional level, and that's just because for me it's very hard to care about something that much, because I look as a sum game, right? What is the total end product here? And so it's sometimes very hard, not that I don't care about customers, because I do. When I talk to people in the Discord, I care about them, and I care about people being happy. But from my perspective, there's a very large gap between getting physically upset about something like that and more looking at the abstraction of the of how to getting to that level is very hard for me.
Yeah, I'm extremely empathetic, I think that's the right word.
Yeah, I think
whereas in my mind, when I'm packing up this box and I make the tape look nice and I put the things in neatly and I put the bubble wrap or the packing paper on top and I put the little business card with the logo facing up nice and neat and I close it up so it's all nicely packed, I put the tape on, I put the label straight. In my mind, I'm thinking how that customer is going to react when they open that package. Now, the argument here for spending a little bit extra time to make the packaging really neat, and there's going to be people who are watching this who will disagree with us, and I'm sure it's in the chat if you don't think it's worth the time, but I spend just a little bit extra time to fold up the box perfectly and put the label on in a good manner and the tape and make it really neat, because while 75% of the people who get the box don't care about the packaging, they care about what's inside, there are 25% of people who will notice that packaging. And these are just random numbers I'm saying. But I really care about those 25% of people who realize that we put extra care into the packaging. And again, this is not what that argument was about, but this was coming across there. I'm very passionate about that concept of how excited that person might be when they see this box that has the Just a Brick in the Bucket logo on the side, and they open it up on the top, they cut it open, and they see our logo again, business card, they can pull that out, they pull the paper off, and then their pieces are neatly packaged inside. Versus, we've had BrickLink orders from other stores where we purchase something and they put it in a box, but they throw the bag in, and they throw in the business card, and there's no form of bubble or padding or anything, so it's not tightly packed, it shakes around like pieces. And you open it up, and it's just nothing special. I really like that concept, and maybe this is that thing we talked about, I don't even know, half an hour ago, where we were saying that we're always striving to kind of dream and make this thing better, or make whatever better, make a project. And in my mind, that's that like striving to make something better than maybe it needs to be, and maybe that's a problem when it comes to packaging of certain things. At some point we talked about like custom packaging and truly, and financially that really doesn't make sense for what we do. But I just have that passion of properly putting it together so that person on the other end is excited about it. Not for what's inside, but for the entire process. I guess, and maybe this goes back to the very beginning. I'm going on this long tangent here, but with us creating some sort of show or experience or something for someone else, maybe that's where I'm at with the packaging. If the packaging is really, really nice and it's this whole process of opening it, it's more of an experience when they purchase from us. Yeah. And obviously that's so, imaginative and off when it's a box. But like,
yeah, and I guess from my perspective is after he explained this all to me, I did really agree with it. But I am in that 75% of people who wouldn't notice, and I would say maybe even on the extreme end of that, because when I receive, I'm more interested in the efficiency of it, right? And to get emotionally, and like if I open up a package, it's out of my mind. If I receive something and then I open it, that's just in the past now. And I guess something that we really discussed here was different types of being dedicated, right? Because a business really needs the kind of dedication that Evan has. But something that is the opposite would be like, I know this is the example I give all the time. It's just the easiest one, but the bin list, right? Something like that, creating that is more where I guess my type of dedication would come in. Is I'm looking at it from a systems perspective of how do all of these pieces, because I'm looking at it as, yes, there's the customer, and that's kind of one component of the system. And then there's all the various components that go to getting it to the customer and, their gears. And I'm looking at it as, how does the packaging system fit in with all of the other factors that influence the customer, the piece quality, the speed at which things are completed, all of the getting the piece from the supplier all the way through to us, and how all of those cogs interact and what can be done to make that process have a higher number, I guess, in terms of the speed, and with each system doing exactly what is necessary to reach the highest result and no more, I guess would be the thing, because then I think of it as energy lost. But if you apply that philosophy to everything and only look at it from top down, then none of those individual little pieces are ever going to actually get anything done, because they don't have any drive to actually, spin their wheel, right? And that's where Evan's, perspective of caring very deeply about the task that he's on is vital to a business functioning. Because when I'm cataloging, I am paying attention to cataloging, but my mind is also elsewhere, thinking about, what could I be doing, or what could the business be doing to improve all of the various factors of how things get to this cataloging table and then get away from the cataloging table. And, whereas I feel like if you were cataloging, you would really be thinking about, is this piece, if this piece was going to be in a customer's hand,
would I want this piece, or is this piece trash because I wouldn't want it? Yeah.
And for me, I'm looking at this piece and going, what is the conservation of energy of me taking this piece and putting it, or what is the dollar lost value in terms of the statistical chance that this piece is going to end up unhappy, in an unhappy customer's hand? What is the average?
Right. And that's why I come in sometimes and I'm so annoyed, because I'm the one verifying the orders or picking orders, and I'm pulling things out of drawers. Mm-hmm. And we've gotten significantly more on the same page, I'd say, in the last month or two, mm-hmm. probably, as to what quality is acceptable. But we don't have like a written thing, just because every piece is different. Tiles differ from the side of bricks, differ from a plate, whatever. Obviously, there's some stuff that's totally wrong, but I'll come in all the time and be like, what is this? Why is this in the drawer? And then it's like, okay, now... is it worth the time? Probably not, because it's a 12-cent piece. Should I refund the piece? Probably. But I go look for another piece in a bin, because as a customer, I would prefer that my order just comes properly. Then I get an email that says, hey, we're going to give you a 12-cent refund for the piece that's not in your order. And usually, actually, I don't know the last time we've given like a 12-cent refund, because I will never give a tiny refund and just say, hey, sorry. Because if someone came to your store and they purchased 4 items from you, let's say just one piece in each lot, and you can't fulfill one of those pieces, that customer then has to go somewhere else. And they probably are going to end up spending more money, because they're going to have to pay for shipping again. So again, big topic here. Most people probably don't do this, but because of me, to make a customer happy, I refund some, or maybe all of the shipping, usually not all of the shipping, but some portion of the shipping, so that theoretically they can go to another store and buy that same piece at no out-of-pocket cost to them. I'm sure it never works out 100% like that. Sometimes they might make money. Sometimes they probably have to spend a little more on shipping. Who knows? But we are the ones clearly losing money. So as much as emotionally it's sad for me that a customer can't get their piece, really, the math also makes it, which is, mm-hmm. I think, probably most of the reason that I keep spitting.
Same.
Yeah. I think that's most of the reason why in the past couple months we've been probably closer onto the same page as to what quality something mm-hmm. is. And we've had a lot less problems with quality, unless it's a lot of like 800. Like I packed an order today that was 800 something pieces. and like of one lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you're going to have some bad quality in there because you're not going to pull out each piece and rotate it and look for a brick that's like 4 cents. It just doesn't make sense.
Which is kind of a discussion. That discussion ended very quickly, but just kind of as an extreme example, is that was kind of a discussion that we had at one point before we got to realizing that we're literally going to have 800 pieces here. Is there was a little bit of time where it was inspect every piece that comes through.
Yeah.
And
like thoroughly inspect.
Yeah. And that is really, I think, the most vital part of the business partnership. I keep really trying to tie it back in here so that we can move on to the next thing. Is that if it was just me running the business, then it might be incredibly efficient. The dollars spent might, go to all the right places, but at the end of the day, it wouldn't have that packaged with love, that really is statistically significant. And it's really hard to account for that because I can go ahead and do marketing research and go ahead and, do all of that. But the thing is, like, that's kind of a waste of time. It's obvious that Evan's touches to it have an effect. And so I don't need to have the exact quantified numbers. It might be that there's a slight loss, but there's, all these abstract.
Yeah. What I love actually, and I almost have proof of this, is for summer, for the months of the second half of June, all of July, and first week of August, I was not fulfilling orders in the store. And you can actually see, not that our feedback got bad or anything, but when people say something, they say, thank you, good order, or whatever. Whereas prior to that, when I was packing, and now we're back at it, people comment and say, great packaging. Mm-hmm. And like, to me, that's like the fulfillment I need to put people's, like that, to me, it pays off.
Yeah.
More so than, of course, it pays off more when that customer thinks of us again, like actually pays off monetarily wise, mm-hmm. but mentally, like that emotional thing again. And I think that's actually why, in a weird way, we are good partners, because we are actually vastly different people.
Exactly.
Like, severely different people. And I think to an extent, that's actually why from day one of our friendship, I don't know what day one was, but you know what I mean.
I know what day one was.
From like a long time ago in our friendship until now, there have always been challenges and stuff, but those are overcome because we both, I think, realize that we bring something to the business that the other person probably does not.
Yes.
I mean, there's overlap, of course, but...
Yes. And I really struggle with seeing things that are gray. I'm a very black and white person. In very strange ways.
That's been a challenge for sure.
For me, I look at it as this is when the clock starts as to when I'm doing this particular task, and here's where the clock ends when I'm doing this particular task. And the instant that clock is done, hands are off the table and I've moved on to the next task. And that's not always intelligent. And so something that I've had to learn is, sometimes, things, they just have to get done. And that's been a very long learning process. And I think then kind of the other way, has gone a bit too, where sometimes for Evan, he has to learn to just accept that this is how it's, that this is the goodness level. Wow, that's a word.
The goodness level is maximized.
Yes. And another argument, I wouldn't say that I actually had a moment, but one argument that I remember was I was standing behind the couch and we were talking about the finite amount of hours in a day. And I was getting so frustrated because I was like, how many 24-hour sprints can you pull, to get something done? Eventually you reach a point where there is no more hours. You are no longer functional.
Of course you do.
But
what I was arguing in that case is, if you need an extra half an hour to get something done in a day, you have that. You can make time for that half an hour. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Sure. If you need 8 more hours in a day, you probably cannot make 8 more hours in your day. But a half an hour here and there, even an hour, 2 hours here and there per day, you could probably do.
And not to rehash an old argument.
It was like, I know. We still haven't concluded this one. There's 168 hours in a week or whatever. I think that's right. 24 times 8. There's 8 days in a week, actually. That's how you get more hours. You add an extra day. Yeah, 168 hours in a week. So that was an argument for sure. Because
Yeah.
for me, it was always like, I know you're scheduled for an 8-hour day. I think that's probably where it started, was you're scheduled for an 8-hour.
No, actually, I think it was the reverse. I was actually trying to get you to be more involved in the business hours wise, because I was trying to explain that like somewhere something has to give, and I just want to know, instead of saying I'm going to be in 40 hours a week, if you're not actually able to be in 40 hours a week, just tell me you're going to be in 30, and then that's totally fine. I just want to know. And then you were like, well, I will just make the time. And I was like, no, you won't just make, well, obviously it's more complicated than this, so I'm repeating what I was saying, but basically my answer was, no, you're not just going to make the time. Either you're going to stop spending time doing something else, or you're going to...
But that's making the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was trying to say. Which
maybe isn't healthy, but...
what I interpreted you as what you were saying is that basically I'm going to continue doing both tasks at the same amount of time and get them both done and just sleep less.
Well, yeah, and that's the mindset. I mean, that argument or that conversation we had was a very direct, like, numbers, you can't actually do this. But that is more the mindset I have, where it's like, this is the task at hand, get the task done, and then move on to the next task.
Yeah.
And obviously, maybe right now you have to stop the task halfway through, but you come back to that task later and finish it up instead of just say, oh, I'll do it later, as in like when I'm back scheduled for tomorrow or something, which I think has been a little bit of an argument for us, where leaving a task open, we'll call it, has been a frustrating thing between us. And as we bring on more employees and stuff in the future, I think a lot of that's going to have to iron itself out anyway, just because it's going to start to be like, we can't tell an employee one thing and then you and I do something completely different, which means whatever, things we truly design as kind of standards for the business, we're going to have to conform to. Because I think it looks incredibly bad when, we do something that an employee shouldn't be doing, unless it's in some situation, of course, certain things make sense, but this whole thing has really been about arguments.
I mean, we kind of started with that, if you have two, what is the saying? Yeah, if 100 people witness an accident, there'll be 300 versions of what happened. And
is that a saying?
I think it's like 100 to
Something
200,
like
but 300 sounds better. And so it really is, if you have two people in a room, there's going to be 4 opinions. And
that's very true.
That really is the soul of business partnership. And I know we've talked with David a little bit, who does not have a business partner. And, he said that something that he thinks allows him to, make so much progress is that he can just decide to do something. And we can't really. So, I mean, we've actually had conversations about just deciding to do something. But something that I kind of struggle with is I want to get approval before I do something, which doesn't really make any sense because I own part of the business. So I shouldn't need to get approval. But in my mind, I think I need to talk to Evan and get approval first. And so something that we've both had to learn is, when is it okay to just decide to do something versus when is this something that we need to talk about? And it's really gray area, because there have been arguments had on both sides where it's like, why are you asking me this? It's extremely frustrating that you always ask me this, versus, why did you do this? You should have talked to me about this. And there's really no easy answer. And so something that if you're looking for a business partner, something that you really need to be able to find is someone who's going to understand that there isn't an easy answer, and that almost everything, you're going to have the same exact conversation a million times, and every single time it's going to be a slightly different rule, because you're doing something really complicated. Business is really, really, really complicated. And so I think kind of the idea that you can create rules for everything kind of doesn't work. But at the same time, you can create rules for a lot of things. And even right there is kind of one of the paradoxes. But you understand what I'm
that's where the
here.
frustration comes from. It from my perspective, at least, is that you're very much, you want there to be a written rule somewhere.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Just go with the flow. Be a little, flexible on certain things, which maybe is, hypocritical to, me being upset that orders didn't go out or something. But I guess in terms of a written rule, that would be written down. Orders go out within 24 hours. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
But there's, of course, things where I think it's flexible. And that's the hard thing where it doesn't always make sense to write every rule down. You know, and we'll see as we continue to grow with how things happen, because we'll have other employees who more or less need a rule book to have a good understanding of what they are supposed to do, because we've trained them to do something. And as we train people, of course, we've had problems already where we train one thing and then it's like they don't remember or they don't know, and then or we change something and we haven't been great at communicating with people who were picking. You know, we changed, I don't think this was a problem, but we changed, instead of pulling drawers off the wall to reassign them, we leave them on the wall halfway out now, and then they get pulled off at the end of the day. You know, this wasn't an issue, it was communicated, but or even the other day, you know, there was a problem with communication in terms of writing the order numbers on the little cards prior to picking versus after picking. You know, it was communicated that you do that ahead of time, but it wasn't received, you know, from the perspective of the person who was picking, which is fine. So that's a situation where you need to realize, like, okay, there has to be some sort of rule that they can go reference instead of us just throwing information at people and saying, just remember it all, because that's unrealistic. Because obviously you and I have been doing this now for 2 years, and we change something and then we remember usually that we changed it because we're the ones who made that conscious decision. Oh, we should actually do this before. And then there's always a reason. Employees aren't always going to know the reason for doing something, you know, and I would prefer to communicate a reason for doing something with them so they have an understanding of what's going on. But then there could always be that problem where you tell them something and they know like 10% of the operations, but they feel like they know 90%. And then they think, oh, I can go change this because this is the way it works. And that 90% is still under the water. They only see the tip of it, and they can't actually, you know, if they go change something, and it causes a problem.
Which is very much something, jumping way back, and then I'm going to make a hard pivot after this
Yeah.
so that we fit things. As back to the domains thing, is the 90-10 iceberg is going back all the way to respect is you can't just jump into the other business partner's stuff, because the truth is I haven't packed orders in a while, and the time that I did, it didn't go well. So there's just, you know, as a business grows, there's a reason why there are so many people at a corporate office for a company that you would think just needs people at all of its locations. It's because there is so many little tiny cogs that are turning in this huge, massive machine that somebody needs to know where the cogs are, and one person can't know all of them. So you have to kind of split it up into all the different
And we're obviously
parts.
not there yet.
No.
Not nowhere near, but there are little aspects of that for sure where I do something because it works, and I didn't feel the need to communicate that to you, or it was so tiny in my mind that it didn't.
In a lot of situations, it's just unreasonable. And this is something that we have talked about.
Yeah.
It is unreasonable to communicate everything.
Yeah.
And asking questions is, maybe we'll have to, at some point in the future, have a part 2. But we've had arguments about asking questions. I ask a lot of rhetorical questions. It's just how I think. And that is something that irritates Evan a little bit, is when I'll ask for information that I should already know. And that is something that I've had to work on. But now I'm going to make a hard pivot to what do you think you should avoid in a business partner? Like if you're doing something with a friend or whatever, and it's starting to grow a little bit, and you're starting to think about maybe this is no longer just a hobby, what are some I guess, red flags in terms of thinking that maybe this isn't the best person to go into business with? Which doesn't mean that they're a great friend. There are friends I have that are probably friends I'm going to have for the rest of my life, and I would not give them any money, you know, or go into a business with them. And that doesn't mean that they're bad people. It's just, it takes a really specific kind of person, you know, to make it in business. And I guess what kinds of things do you think might make not a super great business partner, or are red flags?
So something that I think works for us, and I'll reverse it so I'm answering your question. But if you have a friend or someone that you're working with, well, okay. First of all, I think they usually say don't get into a business with your friend. Don't loan money to friends or family, whatever that is. You know, there's things there, but which I would probably lean towards the side of I would just agree with. You know, that's probably a safe-ish direction. Not that I've followed that in my life, but I would lean in that direction of having a friend be a business partner is something a little bit challenging. Usually because you depending how good of a friend you are or how close you are with them, you might have a problem when it comes to calling out, dumb things or confronting them in certain ways. So I would say someone you do not want as a business partner is someone who you're not comfortable enough with to point out flaws. Not necessarily like their own personal flaws, but things with them where...
Actually, I do think pointing out personal flaws, because all of our most constructive discussions have begun with kind of saying, this is something that I don't like about you. I mean, that's a very blunt way of saying it. Okay. But it does kind of start with, this is something that you do that irritates me. How can we go ahead and implement policy changes so that this doesn't irritate me anymore? And that doesn't mean stopping the thing.
Sure.
It just might mean what causes this irritation and how can we approach it, right?
Yeah, how can you pull away from or how can you change what that little thing is to make that not a problem for both parties anymore? But if you can't point out business flaws, which I think are easier to point out to really anyone who you're working with. Hey, that cost money and that didn't work. But the little things that frustrate you that kind of pile up, those things need to be communicated. But also, what's really important is you and I, for some reason, have this ability to, I have a different opinion of you as a business partner than I do as a friend, than I do as a roommate. So like I can kind of segregate.
Which one of those is the lowest.
I can kind of segregate each of those things, and as a business partner, I would say probably more recently stuff has started to blend together, which is maybe becoming a slight issue for me at least. But for the most part, I can try as best as possible to segregate the reason you're doing something for a business versus if you were doing something not related to the business and just doing it, I would die. I would be so angry with you. Versus as a business, I start to see, okay, there's a reason he's doing that. I'm just going to ignore it for now. Or other way around, as a business, we have a massive argument, but within 20 minutes, we're both having a Moscow meal on the couch together. Like it's just, it's over and we're friends again. Like there's never been a true, like, if the business completely fails, I don't think, there will be a little bit of something obviously, but I don't think it would totally destroy our friendship forever.
No.
And if that's something, that you would be concerned about, I think that's the main reason why they say don't go into business with friends, because your friendship's going to be ruined over that, which I could totally see, being a possibility, but Paul and I could kind of separate that out, I think.
Yeah.
Of course, we're saying that now. Maybe we can't. But I actually do consciously think of different things.
And part of that is kind of based off of evidence, is there have been times in the past where Evan and I have gotten, on a friendship level, when we were younger, extremely angry at each other. And then, for a child, not talking for like 2 weeks is a very long time. But, eventually we get over it, right? And there have been a lot, and like I said, I almost never explode at someone. So when I do, it means I'm extremely angry. And yet I still would have been able, maybe a couple hours later, but that night I would have, been willing to go get Moscow mules or whatever, right? And so, don't just say, oh, I know that this person's not going to get mad at me. Really know that this person's not going to get mad at you. It's really this compartmentalization aspect. And it might sound a little almost sociopathic, but it's where you just need to be able to say, to turn off those emotions when the clock, once you're no longer working, you need to be able to kind of just
I don't think that's a good analogy, because my clock never turns off in terms of like thinking about working.
Yes, but in terms of being emotionally involved in the work, would you say that there is a time, obviously ignoring something coming up, but I'm saying, like, just to say we're arguing about something, and then the meeting is over because the meeting had a definitive end time. Literally 5 minutes later, we can be doing something completely unrelated. Yeah. That's more what I mean, is where
there's
just a
business,
switch,
and then you can switch to a different thing.
Yeah. And I would say that there have been times where we have been in a heated business argument, and then we make jokes in the middle of the argument and switch back and forth. And that is something, that is something that I think is very important to
Sorry, I was highlighting the sheet and I was not.
Oh, I thought you were trying to make suggestions to me.
No, I was just highlighting things.
So I think that is something. Something else is morality. And Evans, we don't talk about philosophy very much. I don't know how much of a philosopher you are, but there have definitely been things over the years where we have disagreed morally, but it's never been a moral issue where it's something that has actually gotten super into the business. There have been little bits
that's another
that I don't
thing
want to
actually,
go into.
Like, if you don't agree with someone as a human, and I hope this goes without saying, but theoretically that would be probably a relatively bad business partner because the views that you withhold you might want to put into the business, and the other person has differing views. It would not be good to try to force them both. So there's another answer to that question of what would make a bad business partner.
Yeah.
I think that's, hopefully goes without saying.
Yeah. Basically, if you couldn't sleep well at night doing some of the things that the person does, you don't necessarily have to fully agree with everything they do. But if you couldn't do it once and to be able to go to sleep at night, then maybe you shouldn't be in a business partnership with them because there's a high chance that they're going to do that thing kind of related to the business at some point. And obviously there's a lot of if, ands, or buts there, right?
That's a very...
But just, in terms of, if you had no negative consequences, only the moral feeling of something, right? Because obviously there are things that someone might do in their personal life that might have personal negative impacts, but I'm ignoring those. I'm just saying from a moral perspective, and you disagree with those things, then that is something that, if you disagree strongly enough that you couldn't stomach doing them one time with no negative consequences, then maybe you should really be rethinking about whether you want to be associated with potentially in the future sums of money and, having the trust. Because another huge thing is trust is once you have the thought that this person might do something bad, you'll never be able to erase that you've had that thought. And over time, slowly, that will decay the trust in the relationship. And you'll start to wonder whether the person is doing something bad. And so from the very beginning, I think you need to be clear about where people stand on their most important issues. And yeah.
Now, this is going to be a hard segue, and it's not really even.
We've had a couple of those.
Oh, well, the whole this one did not feel as. We're wrapping it up. We're getting close to the end. It's a little over an hour now. So
we really want to tell the story that people are here for.
Exactly. So everyone, and again, this is why it's like this is a bad segue because it sounds like everything we've just talked about. We're gonna get into the story now about how Kyle left the business and why he left and all that kind of stuff. Which again, now that we've talked about everything, sounds like it was very bad. It really wasn't. It really wasn't at all. Like to any degree, there was some frustration towards the end, but nothing like what we've kind of just made it seem like it might be. So I don't know. We started this officially different, but like regrew the store and opened in early 2020. Technically, at the very end of 2019, there was some stuff being added and stuff, but it was officially opened in early 2020 with the three of us. It was myself, Paul, and then Kyle as well.
I would like to note that technically, maybe by only a few days, I think Kyle actually joined before I did.
I have no clue.
Because I
probably. I mean, Kyle actually helped me prior. When I was doing this in high school, Kyle had helped. I remember at least one time where I got pick-a-brick cups, or we probably both went and got pick-a-brick cups, and we sorted them out and stuff together. But yeah, I mean, essentially, I'll just say you two came in at the same time. Sure, maybe Kyle was a few days ahead of time. But so Kyle came in, and Paul came in too, and we decided we're gonna kind of do this together. And it was at a storage unit that actually Kyle and I had for a separate business because we had this loft area. We still have it, actually. There's this loft area up there, and there was nothing there at the time. And I was like, oh, let's restart BrickLink.
I'm fulfilling my duty to ensure packages go out.
Good job. Good job. Okay.
Sorry.
The post office might... No.
Is it a holiday?
No, it's not. So there was this loft area, and we put the thing. We essentially, it was like, sorry, let me start over. I started this in my closet, like Paul mentioned a while ago, and then I actually put it in a first storage unit that Kyle and I had. And then I put it in a second unit, and then this was the third unit. But there was this big loft area. So it was the time for, like, in my mind, expansion. I also started watching Pop's Block Shop and stuff. And so we started it there. And I think we did it in my parents' garage. We, like, parted some sets out and stuff, and then it went there, and we actually put them on the walls. And this was a big expansion where, like, a lot of, not a lot, but I don't remember how many acros, probably maybe up to like 16 to 20 acro units that were able to fit in there. And then we were able to come here to the house because you were living here, and there was the garage that we would have had to clean out, and we did clean it out, and we kind of moved and stuff. And then it was a while of like, I don't even know when we really got super serious. Because like we had little spurts of like at the very beginning we added a ton of pieces. But then we took like that late summer, like it was really low and slow. And then in 2021 is when it picked up once again. And I would probably say towards the second quarter of 2021 is when we decided as the three of us, you know, we kind of had this schedule starting to be built out. Like, okay, when are people going to come in and pack?
Lockdown was ending, and it was starting to be where we have to start making decisions between this and other obligations, because prior to this, we were all kind of in rapidly changing states of employment, you know, just because everything was closed down and there was a lot of free time. And so there was really no competition between doing this and other stuff. So it could just kind of remain a fun thing. And I think around this time, it was starting to generate a little bit of revenue. We were starting to realize that we really could be going places, and work was also starting to come back into the picture for all three of us. And I think that is kind of what started the original discussion of, you know, we need to have a schedule, and we need to make sure that things are actually getting done. And there's now enough customers and enough orders that someone needs to be here every day to do something. And
right. And so that was kind of the starting of a schedule being built. And then this is where I would say some of the frustration started to come in terms of our perspective with Kyle. And again, not that there was really much necessarily that was a problem besides the fact that he just sometimes wouldn't show up. And it would be frustrating because, like, you know, maybe there were 2 or 3 orders that needed to get packed and shipped and go out. This is crazy how long ago this feels, even though it was like a year and a half ago now. It just feels like forever ago. But you know, that was where some frustration was coming, I think. And I think you and I probably had the concept that Kyle was probably on his way out. Or
I think
I know there were talks about, like,
there was a lot of frustration growing in terms of showing up, that because I will say we have all matured a lot. We first of all, I would just like to say that, like, Kyle, we hang out with Kyle on like a weekly basis. So there's no way any kind of bad blood between us in any way. He's like, you know, a close friend. So, but at the time we were all in various stages of emotional maturity, you know, early 20s, late teens, trying to figure out kind of what we were doing. And he would sometimes just ghost.
We were not in our late teens last year.
Last year? Wasn't this 20? Well, you're right. I'm 20. Wow. I just had like an early life crisis.
Paul didn't realize how old he was.
Yeah, wow. And I'm getting close to another one now. Wow.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah, sorry. I guess just the whole during COVID 2 years just kind of
it's non-existent. Really.
Yeah. Went in, you know, teenager came out. Anyway, he would just sometimes ghost, and I think that was a major irritating factor for Evan and I. We both had our problems too. I did not do very many hours, and I was very slow, and the whole problem about not getting to a heightened state of emotion that we talked about earlier in terms of really caring. Learning how to care is something that sounds really awful, but learning how to care about things in the moment is something that I've learned. And at that time, I hadn't really picked up that was an important skill yet. So we all had our issues, but with Kyle, it was really just not being there and not telling anyone he wasn't going to be there, or telling last minute. And it was always Evan and I saying, who's going to text Kyle and figure out whether or not Kyle is going to be in today, and who is going to be on premises to pick the orders when Kyle doesn't show up.
Yeah, who's doing that makeup work?
Yeah,
is what it was. Yeah.
We basically always had to schedule a second person, and at the time, it was very emotionally exhausting. Looking back on it, I mean, obviously the business wasn't making any money. It wasn't paying him anything, and he had a job that he needed to work in order to pay his living expenses and stuff. And obviously you did too. But from our perspective, at the time, I think there is a lot of resentment being built up over this fact where it's like, can't he just spend the couple hours to come in? And that kind of was what led us to start asking of, what are we going to do about this, and how can we not? This goes back to the whole keeping a friend thing. Is we were also trying to figure out, like, what can we do to get Kyle to come in more? It took a little bit for Kyle leaving to cross our minds. In the beginning, it was more, what can we do to try and enable
motivate
success?
him to, yeah.
Because he was a friend, and we wanted to see this business be successful with him. And it kind of ended with this conversation. This is jumping way forward, but where basically we talked to Kyle, and Kyle acknowledged that it's not that
he knew he wasn't pulling what at the time was his weight in the company.
Yeah. And it was there was definitely some tension in that conversation, but for the most part, it was very amicable. And I think
the good thing is everyone was on the same page.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Kyle came in like, what are you talking about? I do all my work. Like, it wasn't like he was, I think, really wanting to stay in a form of like doing the work and everything. So he was on, obviously I don't know this right now, but in his mind, I think he was in that direction of wanting to leave, really probably not having fun with it anymore. It became a lot less of a social thing, which is really what it started out as. We'd all get together and we'd part out some sets, and it was always fun. It did, I'd say, in early 21, when we really kind of tried to hammer down what needs to get done in order to grow this, maybe even late 2020, that's when I think it became a lot less social.
It really became okay, we need to stop talking now because it's slowing down what we're doing.
Exactly, yeah. Or we were working in there alone. We'd come in, that was usually the thing with Kyle. It was like he'd be, I don't remember how many hours, anyone was scheduled for, but his job was to come in and pick orders.
We can look.
We could, well, no, I think that was on paper. No,
it was on the
way long
the
ago.
Excel.
We wrote time sheets on paper.
But there was an Excel,
but, he came into this little meeting we had, essentially, I think with also probably expectation or the assumption he was.
I honestly can't remember whether we told him that the meeting was explicitly for this or not.
I don't know.
But the key thing is there, and this is going back to picking a good business partner, is although I would not describe Kyle as the perfect business partner because obviously he left, he was a good business partner in the sense of, out of all of the personalities that could have been involved in exiting a business, Kyle was very mature.
It was smooth.
It was very smooth. There was no drama. There was no fighting. There was nothing. There was just this is true, but at the same time, I want to protect my interests. And there was something, I guess, that is always, and this is going back also to Evan and I's dynamic, is there's always been this admission of the profit that to an extent, this is about money. And there's never been any kind of trying to hide that. I feel like a lot of times there's this, coming up with emotional reasons when really the reason is that I want my work to be counted and I want to get paid out for it. And in this discussion, there was none of the emotional, at least as I'm remembering, there wasn't really this emotional lying. Kyle admitted that he wanted to be compensated kind of for the time he'd put in, which we all agreed was totally fair. And that the main reasons why he wasn't coming in was because he was making more money elsewhere. and that it didn't really just make financial sense for him, and that it didn't have anything to do with us. And there's just a lot going on in his life and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like there were a couple meetings, to be honest. I don't know. Everything's kind of blurring together. It's been a while, but
yeah, I don't remember exactly.
There was way more frustration and anxiety building up to the meeting than there actually was in the meeting. I think.
Of course.
And it was very positive. I don't know. I'm kind of just repeating myself now. You can continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really, nothing exciting. I know a lot of people probably are like hoping for an exciting, cool story. There really wasn't. It was essentially, Kyle was wanting to do other things or didn't want to dedicate the time and stuff and wasn't really invested or having as much fun as maybe he was in the very beginning. And, Paul and I felt that we were doing all the work for him, and he was essentially going to, if he was still here, going to get the benefits of the company growing. Sorry. And we didn't, I didn't want to be doing the work for someone else necessarily.
Which I would like to add. I know, tangent here, we're way over time, but
yeah.
The percentage, I don't know if I want to go into exact detail about how the company is split up between you and I, but this was going on at the same time as we were beginning to figure out whether we wanted to incorporate as an official business. Mm-hmm. And so something that made this substantially easier was the fact that we had not yet. So there was no complicated legal stuff. There was nothing like that. There was just basically a
piece of paper with a pen. That's
a
like,
piece of paper with a pen admitting, Evan and I agreeing that he did in fact have something to do with the business, and him admitting that he was stepping away from it. And other than what we had agreed on, which I don't want to go into explicitly, the terms, but other than what we had agreed on, there was no further compensation. And because it wasn't this whole legal fiasco, that piece of paper was good enough, and we were all happy with it. And
and the truth is, I don't know that we even know where that piece of paper is anymore.
Actually, I think I do.
Oh,
I also have the original ownership calculations.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
Which ownership is something about a business partner that is very important that I want to talk about real quick is I don't know. Do I want to talk about any of the recent? I'll just talk about way back when. There was no friction between Evan and I really originally in terms of how the business should be split up. There was in terms of the exact percentage points, but when we first decided to incorporate, I think we were both really on the same page. And that is something, honesty in terms of recognizing how much work you have put in, and having a business partner who's also going to be honest about that is another important thing that you need to be able to have. And that discussion has gotten a little bit murkier as time has gone on. Maybe in the future, not the near future, there'll be another episode about that. But there have occasionally been discussions that have cropped up about who's doing all the work and how the company should be allocated. But at the time when we were first incorporating, Kyle was kind of a part of those discussions. We wanted to figure out whether he wanted to be on that piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And the final answer was really no. And in terms of, I'm really trying to drill down to an essay conclusion here. I've been writing way too many essays. But
yeah, I mean, we're obviously on the way out. We're way more than the amount of time. Last time we did this for about an hour. Today's gone a lot longer.
I don't even know what time we started, but I keep checking the clock.
So yeah, I mean, I think we're really trying to wrap it up now, but and I'm sure, if you're listening to this on a podcast platform, first of all, thank you. And then, if you're not and you're on YouTube and you're either watching this right now, or if you're, watching this after the fact, go ahead and put a comment, down below. And because I guarantee there's going to be questions that come out of this, because
please keep it civil.
We jumped in so many places. This was not clear whatsoever as to what direction we were headed in. So, if you have any questions or anything and you're listening to this, go jump over to YouTube. You can type in the comment section there, or if you're on YouTube right now, wait for the stream to end, and then you can actually go into the comment section. Hey, just as we're wrapping up, this fly is back. It's been gone. It hasn't been here the whole time, which has been great, but it must be time to end. Yeah. Do you have anything to kind of wrap up? I think we've probably repeated ourselves enough.
I think really just the final conclusion here is that business is all about knowing is all about knowing the systems that you're interacting with, and your business partner is a system.
Thank you.
You are a system, Evan. And you really need to be sure that you've done your math and that the person you're going to be in business with is a good choice for you. And I don't know exactly where we stand on picking a friend for a business partner, but just because someone's your friend is not good enough reason to go into a business partnership with them, because it might ruin your friendship and it might lose you a lot of money, and no one likes that. So I guess if we really could just drill it down, is there any one single thing that you would say is the major piece of advice? Tough question.
No, I don't think there is. We've just been so all over the place with this. In all honesty, it's hard to say hey, this person's good to be a business partner. I would just say, if you're thinking about a business partner, don't just
don't just go for it.
Yeah, really consider whether it's a good idea, and maybe talk to them. Maybe.
I mean, that really is, if you can't sit down and ask someone with a straight face, what's going to happen if this business goes south, and are you going to hate me? If you can't look them in the eye and have a conversation about that, then you shouldn't be in business together.
Yeah, and the easiest answer to that question is if you sit down with someone and say, hey, what's going to happen if this fails? The easiest answer is, oh, nothing's going to happen, right? But that's how everything is. It's oh, it'll be fine. It'll be a great ending. Be a little more realistic than that. Again, not to say that we will not be friends if something happens here. But there will be, of course, and that'll fizzle away.
Yeah.
We're not going to throw away 20 years of friendship, I think, and growing up together over, a little Lego business that fails. But for a period of time, there will be friction, of course. But it's not going to be a friendship ending thing.
Just also keep in mind that you can never predict how big a business will grow. And not that Just a Brick in the Bucket will probably ever be a huge business, but let's just say you're not running a Lego business. You're running something else. What if, for some reason, your tiny little company blows up? You might be okay losing 30 grand, but you might not be okay losing 500 million. Not that most people watching this will ever make 500 million. It's just a random number, but it is, I'm sure if I lost Evan $500 million, he'd be a little bit more irritated than if I lost Just a Brick in the Bucket, as it currently is. And so you really need to look at it like that too, is you need to consider the worst case possible thing and the best case possible thing. If the business makes a ton of money, you also need to discuss how are we going to divide that up. You might be okay going at whatever percent you're at now, but if there's a ton of cash involved, is that still going to be okay for you?
That's actually very true. We didn't talk about that at all, and we're not going to. We're just going to wrap it up now. But think about your capital investment as well. That's important too.
Yeah.
With BrickLink, it was really small, but with a restaurant, for example, drastically different. So that, I wanted to say we're done, but we got into a business where minimal startup capital, if we're really talking in terms of most businesses.
Just a Brick in the Bucket could really honestly be restarted. If at least the store component. Obviously, if the brand name was ruined, that'd be a little hard. But the capital investment to start Just a Brick in the Bucket over is not so obscene that it couldn't be done.
It's relative. It's very small in terms of a business world. So that's something that also I think would ease. Now we're invested into it, not just monetarily, but emotionally and stuff, and lots of time. So it'd be a little different, but. If you invest a lot of money into something and someone else also does, and your best friends, and, not to say it doesn't work all the time, or not saying it won't always not work. Sorry. You know what I'm trying to say. Okay. Are we good? It's been a very long time, and
Your friendship is worth more than the business, so don't put it in as collateral.
Sure. Actually, that's a great way to put it. Yeah. Thank you to everyone who is here and who has been here the whole time, because we've gone a very long time now. Yeah, I think that's it. So thank you all very much for joining our conversation. We will see you next month on the next episode of BrickSide Chat.